Hello, everybody. Our Hangout on the Air is now live. Now, I'm going to do a very short, hopefully, live stream today about my book, The Few Who Count, which is very hard to see, about how I tried to reach out to Ayn Rand and her circle with regard to the ideas in my book when I first finished writing it, how that didn't work because Ayn Rand was dead and Robert Hessen, who was her protege, who wrote about corporations, actually disagreed with my ideas. And I'm also going to talk about what it's like to be an independent author and to actually try to reach out to people who are well known and to attempt to share ideas with influencers. Yeah, I learned that word influencers on YouTube. I didn't know they were called that. But now that I know, I think it's important. So in order to make sure that I have maybe an audience for this live stream, I'm going to go over to my other computer. And please bear with me. You can look at my birds while I'm doing this. Summer is out here. And so there's lots of interesting stuff going on. I just need to go and share this. So I'll go here to my other channel because I'm doing this on my lesser channel. I have, on my other channel, I have 1,700 subscribers now, but these subscribers all want to see Bo grooming me, and they do not, in fact, want to know about corporations. Okay, now I'm going to silence that, but share it on Facebook and on Twitter. Live now. Okay, hopefully that'll work. Okay, do you want to come here? No, someone doesn't want to come and be in the live stream, so that's okay. That is perfectly fine. And so here I am. So what made me think of doing this live stream is the conversation that my friends Julia and Michelle and I had with regard to Nassim Taleb on our last live stream. By the way, tomorrow, which is December 7th, and I believe the anniversary of Pearl Harbor Day, our guest on the live stream on my more popular channel will be Karen Ann Harlos, the pink flame of liberty, and she will be talking about the Libertarian Party and her work for the Libertarian Party and whatever topic she thinks is most apropos and most current right now. So I hope you will join me and Julia and Karen Ann Harlos on my other channel tomorrow night, Friday, December the 7th at 8:45 p.m. Central Time, 6:45 Pacific or Julia time. Okay, so one of the things that we were talking about with Julia and Michelle was that Nassim Taleb was writing his books independently, that nobody could tell him what to say, and so on and so forth. And that might have been one of the things that contributed to his being able to have such unusual and potentially unpopular ideas show up in his books. But the other side of this story is that most of us who are independent authors are not being paid to write what we write. Most of us are doing it on our own time, and we're writing, whatever comes to us as what we want to say. And most of us don't ever get published. Recently, we've been able to publish ourselves. But even so, without the publicity, it's very hard to get anywhere with it. And one can write a book, and it can be a very good book, and then one can die and never be heard from again. So the immortality of our works is not in our own hands, it's in the hands of other people. And if other people don't notice, or other people are not fascinated by what we have to say, our works will die with us. Okay, so the question is, what did I do as an author? Okay, so my first book was The Few Who Count. At the time, I was very much a fan of Ayn Rand. I still am a fan of hers. I know more about her, so I know more about her limitations too, but I'm still a very big fan of hers. And I had been writing this since 1976, when I was 16 years old. And I went through college, and then I went to law school. And then about 1983 is when I finished writing it. Okay. So during that span of time, of course, I read all that I could get hold of Ayn Rand. I was a very avid fan. But you know what? I didn't write Ayn Rand a single fan letter. And here's why. And I'm kind of like this about Nassim Taleb now. I'm a fan of Nassim Taleb. And, Julia was asking me, well, why don't you ask him this question that you have about insider trading? And I'm not going to approach Nassim Taleb until I feel that I have something to say to him that would be of value to him, not just to me. So at the time, I didn't just want to be this gushing fan of Ayn Rand and say, oh, I've read your books and they've changed my life and blah, 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 because I figured she had a lot of fans who did this, and I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to make a real contribution. So I was writing my novel, and eventually, and of course, the structure of my novel was not absolutely clear to me in 1976 when I first started writing it, when I was 16. But eventually, the structure came to me as one of my central ideas became clear to me when I was in law school and I was studying corporations. And I remember explaining this to my father. We were at the dining table. We were having one of our normal conversations. And I said, you know what? The corporate structure is actually a violation of free enterprise, because it takes away the rights of individuals to sue those who own the corporation for any wrong that the corporation does to them. And so it violates the rights of the individual, and it gives a collective rights that individuals wouldn't have. So I explained all of this to my father. He understood it. I made it part of The Few Who Count. And okay, I was mistaken in this. I didn't know that I wasn't the first person to ever have thought of this, because nobody in law school said anything about it. None of the case law said, hey, this is a violation of free enterprise. It's unconstitutional. It's bad. It violates due process. None of that was said by anyone to me. So I did not know that this idea was not original to me. And I'm one of those asocial people, which means I don't do my research on other people as much as I do thinking inside my head about what's right, what's wrong, what is correct, what is false, what is true. So when I finished writing The Few Who Count, I wrote a letter to Ayn Rand, and I thought I would explain the idea to her, explain to her that my novel, The Few Who Count, was a defense of free enterprise and could possibly save the world. And I thought she would understand that, because if you notice in Ayn Rand novels, most of the villains are corporate kind of guys. You know, they're not the inventor. They're not really the entrepreneur. They're the corporate board. And these are people who are elected by stockholders, but they have nothing at stake, or as Nassim Taleb would say, they have no skin in the game, okay, which is another way of saying it. So this was my idea. I sent the letter to Ayn Rand and hoped to have her support in the publication of my book. And unfortunately, she had died and the letter came back unopened. So we don't know what Ayn Rand would have said about this, because she wasn't able to say anything about it. However, after that, I thought, well, I have to find somebody in her inner circle that I could appeal to. And I heard of Robert Hessen. I understood that he'd written something about corporations. Okay, this is where I failed myself. You know, I made a mistake. I didn't read this book. Okay. He had written In Defense of the Corporation. And the chapter that you would want to read if you want to know what he had to say that goes against what I had to say. This chapter is called Are Corporations Creatures of the State? And it appears on page 15 of this rather short book. So actually, I managed to somehow phone Robert Hessen, and I told him I was an objectivist and that I had written a novel, and he was very supportive because he didn't know what my novel said. And I sent him my manuscript. It was before it was published. And I don't believe I ever heard back from him. And I don't blame Robert Hessen, because he was probably like, gee, she's not an objectivist. She goes against everything that I believe and that all objectivists believe, because to this very day, that is the objectivist position. Robert Hessen's position is the objectivist position. And I never got a chance to talk to Ayn Rand about it. And actually, the first word in this chapter, can you guess what the first word in this chapter is by Robert Hessen in Defense of the Corporation? I didn't remember this until I went back and revisited it. But the first two words are Ralph Nader. Oh my God. Because I think I got so flustered with my mistake with Robert Hessen that I think that once I did read his book In Defense of the Corporation, I latched on to the Respondeat superior argument of his and I destroyed it. But I didn't remember. I remembered that somebody other than me had thought of it first, but I didn't remember who it was. I certainly didn't remember that it was Ralph Nader. And recently, the name of Ralph Nader has been popping up a lot in my readings of Nassim Taleb, because he's a big Ralph Nader fan. I never was a Ralph Nader fan because I associated Ralph Nader with strict product liability, which I disagreed with and still disagree with. Okay, so I need to probably revisit the writings of Ralph Nader, and I haven't done that yet. And perhaps I owe Ralph Nader a big apology. That's certainly possible. So this is where we are with that. But so I'll read you the first paragraph of this chapter of In Defense of the Corporation. Ralph Nader shares the widely held belief that every corporation through its charter, receives special privileges from the government and thus is a creature of the state. He has made this claim in print on at least 7 different occasions. And see, I missed all 7 occasions. I thought this idea was novel with me. So, okay. But his only proof consists of naming 3 corporate features: entity status, perpetual life, and limited liability, which he regards as state created privileges. Before challenging him or challenging his claim, it will be useful to supply the explanation he does not provide. Okay. Okay, I'm not sure I want to read everything that he says here. But what I wanted to focus on is limited liability for torts. You know, you can make a contractual agreement, and he argues about that. You can make a contractual agreement when you are working with a corporation that even though as a corporation it has limited liability and the stockholders are shielded, you can ask that one of the stockholders not be shielded or that all of them not be shielded, and contractually you can make that happen. Of course, you can agree to anything contractually. But that's not really the issue. Tort liability is not something that you can contractually do away with, since it might be an innocent bystander who has absolutely no connection with your corporation. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are a pizza delivery company and you tell your employees that if they deliver it on time, they will get paid, and if not, they will suffer a penalty. And you make it very appealing to them to deliver a pizza within 5 minutes of ordering it, or whatever amount of time. And then your employees become reckless and they run over a pedestrian. Now, remember, the pedestrian is not the person who ordered the pizza, so you have no contractual arrangement between the pedestrian and the pizza delivery company. Under Respondeat Superior, the doctrine of Respondeat Superior, under the common law, the employer, whoever the employer is, of the person who delivered the pizza, is jointly and severally liable for any harm that is done to the pedestrian by the lowly employee. Okay, it doesn't mean the employee isn't responsible for what he did. He is responsible. But anything that he doesn't pay, his master must answer for. And that is what Respondeat Superior means. It means let the master answer. Now, you might say, well, you know, Domino's Pizza isn't the master of its employees. They are free agents. They can do whatever they want. And therefore, this doctrine is an ancient one. And in fact, when this doctrine was taught to us in law school, they told us it was a legal fiction to get at the deep pocket of the employer. However, that's not really true. I investigated the matter, and Respondeat Superior is a doctrine that applied to servants and now applies to employees. And in fact, the word employee is the new word that we use for servant, because the word for servant has undergone a semantic shift and a pejorization. And so we are embarrassed to call our employees our servants, because we think that would make them sound like slaves. But in fact, there's a huge difference between an independent contractor who is your agent but not your servant, and an employee who is both your agent and your servant. And because you actually control your employee and get to tell him not just what to do, but how to do it. That's a difference between an employee and a contractor, an independent contractor. An independent contractor will do what you ask, but you don't get to tell him how to do it. A servant or an employee must do what you ask and must do it the way you tell him to do it. And once you control somebody that way, you're also responsible for what he does. And I think that that is a perfectly good legal doctrine. Now, I'm not going to go into that in greater depth, but I would like to share with you some places where you can go and read up on this. So I'm going to screen share, and then I'm going to go behind here and good grief. Well, you can read about it here, and let me go see if that's actually showing on the screen. Yes, it is. Okay, so I write about Respondeat superior in a number of places. One of them is on pub wages and its songs of slavery. And I'll read you a little bit there. The doctrine of Respondeat superior, which is still applicable today, says that an employer is responsible for the torts committed by his employees during the course of their employment. Respondeat superior means let the master answer. It makes sense if you think of the servant as a mere instrument in the hands of his master, having no will of his own. It makes a lot less sense if you think of the employee as a free man or woman. There are those who argue that the view of an employee as a mere instrument is just a legal fiction designed to get at the deep pocket of the employer. However, there is more to it than that. If you hire someone to work for you, but they are self-employed, then despite the wages they receive for doing your work, you are not held responsible for their wrongful acts while on the job. It is only if someone works for you full-time, is directed by you as to how to do the work, not just which work is to be done, and is completely dependent on you for his livelihood, that you end up paying for his misdeeds. The key here is control. Is the employee entirely under your control? Does he take his orders from you? Do you basically own him during the workday? In that case, he's not really an independent person. He's your instrument, and you are responsible. Who are we responsible for? Our children, our pets, and our servants. Why? Because we control them. We get to tell them what to do, we support them, and they answer to us. Okay, I am now going to stop the screen share, and I'm back. And there is down below also a scholarly article by me, which you can see at ResearchGate, and which I have shared here before. And it's about the changes in the semantics. We're afraid to call our employees our servants. But if you look at the legal doctrines, the exact same legal doctrines apply. It's the same servant-master relationship, only now most people are the servants of a corporation and not an individual. And I believe this is a change for the worse, because nobody is responsible for what the corporation does. And the people who are making the decisions actually have no skin in the game. So someday I would like to talk to Nassim Nicholas Taleb about this, but I'm not sure that I've done my research on him enough. since I haven't read everything that he's written, nor have I read everything that Ralph Nader has written. And since I did shortchange Ralph Nader, I am going to try to do that research before I ask him. But one more thing. So this is the series that I've been watching. It's about insider trading. And I want you to ask yourself, what is the reason that insider trading is even criminalized? Does it make sense for that to be a crime? What's going on here? Okay. I think that I'm going to have to get ready for lunch with Bo. So I'm going to stop the broadcast, and hopefully some of you will discover it long after I am off the air. And I hope to see all of you on my other channel tomorrow night at 8:45 p.m. Central Time, 6:45 Julia's time. Thank you, and we'll see you later.